Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with an arrest in the murder of insurance executive Brian Thompson in New York. And we get the very latest now from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John.
And Nathan, the alleged killer is 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. He was spotted by a customer in a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Authorities say in his backpack they found a 3D printed pistol and a 3D printed black silencer. They also found a 3-page manifesto. NYPD Chief of Detectives Joe Kenny.
We don't think that there's any specific threats to other people mentioned in that document, but it does seem that he has some ill will toward corporate America.
Mangione attended an elite Baltimore prep school, graduating as valedictorian in 2016. He went on to earn undergraduate and graduate degrees in computer science in 2020 from the University of Pennsylvania. His family owns a country club north of Baltimore. He worked as a data engineer at TrueCar. A survey of his online presence also shows that he praised the manifesto of another Ivy League graduate known for violent acts, the Unabomber. And he's going to be extradited from Pennsylvania to New York to face murder charges. Social media last night was full of praise for Mangione, with Luigi the top trending topic on X, and Free Him coming in at number 7. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. Well, turning overseas, Israel has stepped up its attacks on military sites in Syria, striking hundreds of targets across the country. According to multiple reports, the strikes targeted army bases, airports, and surface-to-air missile systems. Bloomberg's Stuart Livingstone Wallace says Israel is wary of the opposition groups that brought down Bashar al-Assad's government.
It seems to be primarily driven by their concerns about where all this weaponry ends up. And we are talking about really, really serious amounts of munitions. And that also includes weapons of mass destruction, so chemical supplies and stockpiles and that sort of thing. And we know Assad was using chemical warfare probably as recently as 2018. So it's definitely a real thing.
And Bloomberg's Stuart Livingstone Wallace says the Israeli attacks have drawn criticism from Arab countries, including Egypt and Saudi Arabia, which accuses Israel of seeking to occupy more Syrian territory and sabotage the country's security and stability.
And meanwhile, Karen, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in court today testifying against charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in 3 separate cases. Netanyahu has repeatedly requested to delay his testimony because of the conflicts rolling the Middle East, but those requests were mostly denied by the courts.
Now, Nathan, to politics in the U.S., Donald Trump's defense nominee Pete Hegseth said the president-elect has told him to keep fighting for Senate confirmation. The former Fox News host appeared on Fox's Sean Hannity last night after meeting with a key Senate Republican, Joni Ernst.
The left is trying to turn this into a trial in the media, a show trial, and we're not going to let that happen. I'm going to walk into the door of every one of these senators with just as an open book, willing to answer their questions because they deserve answers.
Pete Hegseth has been looking to bolster his Senate support amid allegations of sexual misconduct, alcohol abuse, and workplace mismanagement. After their meeting yesterday, Senator Ernst said she'll support Hegseth through this process and looks forward to a fair confirmation hearing. In another development, President-elect Trump has endorsed Casey Crosby as co-chair of the Republican National Committee. She would succeed Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara, who's appeared open to succeeding Marco Rubio in the Senate. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis would have to confirm that appointment.
Turning to markets now, Karen, futures are moving just a bit lower after yesterday's declines on Wall Street. The S&P 500 dropped from a nearly overbought technical level. Callie Cox is chief market strategist at Ritholtz Wealth Management.
When people talk about valuations in the S&P, typically they're talking about big tech valuations, and you have to sort out by sector and sector to really find the value. We really like rate-sensitive sectors here. I think real estate is interesting. I think consumer discretionary could be interesting, especially if the economy holds up through 2025. Financials, of course, have been really strong in the back half of the year. That could also be interesting, especially if the economy surprises to the upside.
Callie Cox with Ritholtz Wealth Management says the next key event for markets is tomorrow when we get the Consumer Price Index.
Well, checking some stocks on the move this morning, Nathan. Shares of Oracle are down 8.5%. The company did report quarterly revenue in line with estimates, but that's disappointing investors who have boosted the stock to a record high in recent weeks on enthusiasm for the company's Ascendant Cloud business.
Boeing has reportedly restarted production of its workhorse 737 MAX model. Karen, Reuters is reporting production resumed last Friday. The move follows a month after a strike by 33,000 factory workers at Boeing that shuttered the plane maker's commercial manufacturing.
Well, shares of Hershey rose almost 11% to start the week, Nathan. The surge comes after Bloomberg News reported Mondelez is considering buying the chocolate maker for $50 billion. Bloomberg's Crystal C broke the story and says any deal would face regulatory scrutiny.
This is a deal that would, in a normal circumstance, attract antitrust reviews. So I don't think we're there yet. Like we said, it's a preliminary approach. Also, the other thing that is unique to the situation is that the deal is subject to approval of the Attorney General in Pennsylvania because of the trust structure. So there are a lot of regulatory hurdles on top of the market hurdles.
Bloomberg's Crystal C says this is the second time Mondelez has looked at acquiring Hershey. In 2016, it broke off talks after its $23 billion bid was rejected by the chocolate maker.
Finally, Karen, let's turn to Europe now, where more than 600 senior women in finance are attending Bloomberg's inaugural Women, Money and Power event in London. The representation of women on boards has almost tripled since 2010, and the most gender-diverse companies are delivering higher shareholder returns. Exclusive analysis by Bloomberg Intelligence shows in developed markets, the top 20% of companies where for a female board membership returned 2 to 5% more than the bottom 20. CEO and founder of WB Directors, Fiona Haythorne, has told Bloomberg Radio more sectors are beginning to look for ways to get women into leadership roles.
Tech and also private equity. If you think of the FTSE 100 and particularly financial services, they've had the lens of the regulator on them saying, you need to do something about the diversity of your teams. PE hasn't had the same lens, but they're coming to us and saying, actually, now what can we do for our 60 investing companies? What sort of training should we do? Because that industry is very male dominated.
And that was Fiona Haythorne, CEO and founder of WB Directors, an organization that works to increase diversity in executive and non-executive leadership.
It is time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Reaction continues after a Marine veteran who put an agitated subway rider in a chokehold on a New York subway has been acquitted in the man's death. A Manhattan jury cleared 26-year-old Daniel Penny of a criminally negligent homicide charge. The verdict came after a more serious manslaughter charge was dismissed because the jury deadlocked on that count. The case arose from Jordan Neely's May 2023 death and became a prism for differing views about public safety. Penny gripped Neely around the neck for about 6 minutes. Penny's defense said he was protecting fellow subway passengers. Thomas Kenneth, a lawyer for Penny, spoke in a Manhattan pub after the verdict.
We think that this should have happened probably on day one, but the point thing is it happened.
The verdict enraged Neely's father, Andre Zachary.
I miss my son. My son didn't have to go through this. I didn't have to go through this either. It hurts.
Passengers had said Neely, whose family says he struggled with homelessness and mental illness, was acting erratically and shouting before he was put in a chokehold by Penny. Music mogul Jay-Z fired back against accusations that he took part in a sexual assault of a 13-year-old girl at a 2000 VMA after party. Jay-Z, or Sean Carter, filed a motion yesterday to deny the plaintiff's request to remain anonymous, calling for either her identity to be disclosed or the civil suit to be dismissed. The case is tied to embattled rapper Sean Diddy Combs. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned deadly gang violence in Haiti. UN spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric says more than 180 people were killed in Port-au-Prince over the weekend.
The Secretary General calls on the Haitian authorities to conduct a thorough investigation and ensure that perpetrators to these and all other human rights abuses and violations are brought to justice.
The UN's Dujarric says Guterres reiterated his call for financial and logistical support to help the Haitian National Police Department to address gang violence. Brazilian President Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva is in intensive care at Sao Paulo Hospital after undergoing emergency surgery. The hospital said Lula felt headaches late Monday evening, and a brain scan showed intracranial hemorrhage resulting from the accident he suffered at home in October. Finally, today, the Supreme Court hears arguments over a proposed railroad that would transport millions more gallons of oil along the Colorado River, with opponents arguing the federal government did not properly assess environmental risks. The Supreme Court is hearing a classic case where commercial interests run against the public interest in environmental protection. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. Here's John's Stash Hour. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. About a year ago, the Knicks made that big trade with the Raptors. Knicks certainly pleased with what they've gotten from OG Anunoby. R.J. Barrett's played well in his native Toronto. Two teams met north of the border, and with 28 seconds left, the Knicks led by 2, and Anunoby, who's known for his defense, blocked Barrett's shot, and the Knicks won 113-108. Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson all scored 20 or more. Barrett in defeat scored 30 at the Garden. The Rangers lost to the NHL's worst team. Chicago came in having won only 8 games. Recently fired their coach. Blackhawks won 2-1. It's the Rangers' 8th loss in the last 10. Monday Night Football in Dallas. Bengals and Cowboys were tied when, with just over 2 minutes left, Dallas blocked a Cincinnati punt but tried to recover and return it and instead fumbled it. So Cincinnati kept possession and struck late.
Man down left. Burrow. Sideline. Chase. Spin. There he goes. Jamar Chase. Not catching him. Touchdown, Bengals.
ESPN The Call. It was Joe Burrow's 3rd TD pass. 2 went to Chase, who had 177 yards. The Bengals won 27-20. Both teams are 5-8. Dallas 1-6 at home, beating only the Giants. The baseball winter meeting's underway in Dallas, but whatever takes place this week, it won't top the news of Juan Soto leaving the Yankees, joining the Mets. Yankees general manager Brian Cashman was on the Yes Network.
Yeah, they left it all on the table, and then ultimately the player has to make a decision based on, reasoning that he'll ultimately share. I'm sure everybody's going to want to know, what led him to go that direction versus our direction versus some other direction, But he earned that right, and congrats to him, his family, and the Mets.
And since the Soto news, the odds on the Mets winning the World Series improved from plus 1,200 to plus 700. Soto and the Mets will make their 2025 visit to Yankee Stadium, a weekend series in mid-May. John Stash Hour, Bloomberg Sports. Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. A suspect is now in custody in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. 26-year-old Luigi Mangione was tracked down in Altoona, Pennsylvania after a 5-day manhunt that exposed a lot of anger against the health insurance industry. Here's Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro.
In some dark corners, this killer is being hailed as a hero. Hear me on this. He is no hero.
Governor Josh Shapiro spoke at a news conference following Mangione's arrest. This morning, we're joined by Bloomberg's Miles Miller. Miles, good morning. What more have we learned about this alleged killer, Luigi Mangione?
Yeah, so we know that Luigi Mangione is a UPenn graduate. We know that he comes from a wealthy family in Baltimore, and it appears over the last 6 to 12 months, he, has been engaged in basically writings online about sort of being detached from capitalism and really critical of the healthcare system and systems like it. And so, that being the motive for this. He appeared in court last night at a preliminary arraignment, and that was just on a charge of forgery and carrying a gun without a license. He was, of course, caught in Altoona, Pennsylvania at a McDonald's after someone at McDonald's recognized him from those photos that were shared by the FBI and the NYPD. He will be in a jail in that area for some time until he's extradited to New York.
And talking about that McDonald's in Altoona, there's been a lot of online throttling against that franchise after Mangione was caught there. This really seems to have sparked something on social media, Miles.
Yeah, the really strange thing is that this is a guy who is anti-capitalism and he's caught in a McDonald's. And then this is a guy who's anti-capitalism. But, the first pictures we got of him were from a Starbucks, right? Two of the biggest companies, definitely by market cap. We have seen some of what he's written in his manifesto, and it is clearly against capitalism. And he specifically calls out United Healthcare. And so, there have been people online who, have been talking about issues with the healthcare system, but certainly no one can be supportive of violence against a company's CEO based off of issues that they had with the healthcare system. And you heard that from Josh Shapiro, that this is not the way we deal with things in this country.
So the suspect Mangione, as you said, is going to be held in Pennsylvania for several days. Walk us through the extradition process back to New York. How is this going to work?
Yeah, so there are two ways that extradition happens. The first way is that the suspect can waive extradition. If he waives extradition, he can be back in New York in a few short days. Now, if he fights extradition, it'll take about 30 to 45 days to get him here. Usually that process happens with a judge. Josh Shapiro was at the Pennsylvania governor was at that press conference. Usually they do what's called a governor's warrant, and the two governors, Kathy Hochul and Josh Shapiro, will talk. They'll send some paperwork and he'll be forced to come here. We haven't gotten any indication any way or the other. But yeah, if he contests it, it'll take more than a month to file the paperwork to get him to New York.
So in our last 30 seconds, are we expecting much to happen over the next several hours in this case?
I think we'll expect the NYPD to start getting more details about his background. We learned that he left that bus terminal in New York, went to Pennsylvania, first to Philly, then to Pittsburgh. And so we'll find out what happened along the way. Did he stop anywhere? Who did he interact with? What did he do? They'll search his home in Baltimore, where he had lived with his parents. At one point, they'll search his home in Hawaii. They'll talk with friends, all of it to sort of get in his mind and see, what led him to do this.
Thanks for this, Miles. Great having you with us this morning. Miles Miller of Bloomberg News, the latest on the apprehension of the suspect in United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson's killing in Midtown Manhattan last week. Karen.
Nathan, we want to bring you now to London for Bloomberg's inaugural Women, Money and Power event. We're speaking to influential female voices in global finance and technology who are navigating change and disruption across various industries. This morning, Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua sat down with Franklin Templeton President and CEO Jenny Johnson. They started their conversation discussing private credit. Let's listen in.
Banks really want to preserve their capital for their biggest and best clients, and so it created this opportunity for private credit to step in. I think that, honestly, low interest rates were probably one of the things that fueled private equity, but also a bit of the environment where I think less and less companies want to go public, and I don't think that trend changes. I don't think there's a lot of people going, boy, I'd really like to be a public company CEO these days. And I think in a time where you have all these great technological advances like AI, where companies need to invest in the technology that may not pay off for years, it's really hard with the pressure of quarterly earnings. And so in some cases, transforming a company ends up being better in the structure of private equity. So I think that trend is here. I think, and I'm a big fan of blockchain. I think that's going to open up new investment opportunities and kind of interesting things. I always say that eventually your financial advisor is going to report your portfolio in three ways. They're going to say, here's your investment return, here's the impact you have, and by the way, here are the loyalty programs that you've gotten from your tokenized equity ownership that have now tied loyalty programs to it. So that's where I think things ultimately evolve.
So on blockchain and Bitcoin, does that change significantly under a Trump administration?
Oh, for sure. And again, I always make sure you separate Bitcoin from blockchain. Okay,
fair.
So Bitcoin, different deal. I was a skeptic of it initially, but A couple things people said to me. One, somebody who lived in Israel said, my parents and grandparents had their money taken away by the government. They will always keep a portion of their savings in Bitcoin. And then I had actually an employee who lived in the Middle East and said, if I say the wrong thing, I can have my accounts frozen. So I always keep a percentage of my earnings in Bitcoin. And obviously in the kind of key, because they can keep it protected. So if you grow up in a society where you feel your money's safe, you think that doesn't make any sense. And why should this external currency come in? But if you actually think that there's a lot of the world that would like that safety and control, you can see where Bitcoin has a lot of opportunity. And then blockchain, again, it's a technology. It's a technology that's going to do a lot of really good things. In financial services, a lot of toll takers take a piece of a transaction. That can eliminate it, and so it's going to create more efficiencies. It's going to open up investment opportunities.
Jenny, do you think that there'll be a catalyst for companies to want to go public again, or is it just private all the way? Is this, the trend for the next 5-10 years?
So I actually think it used to be you go venture, private equity, IPO, public markets. I think that stays, and we see it where people are just waiting a lot longer to go public. But at some point, people want that liquidity and monetize it. And the private markets aren't yet that liquid. There's some amount. But I actually think what you're starting to see is public companies being taken private because we invested in a company, InvestNet, and they have $3 trillion in assets by financial advisor platform, right? They need to invest in it. It is hard as a public company to make those kind of investments and say to the street, hey, by the way, this is going to impact earnings for the next 18 months. So they become private, right? And so they were taken private by Bain Capital, and then they'll go public, I think, again. So I think there's going to be this new cycle of pulling people off, doing the investment that needs to happen, whether it's AI investments or whatever, and then going public again.
But do you have a concern on valuations in private markets? I mean, this comes over and over again, but we haven't really seen anything. Maybe real estate went a bit ugly, but there's nothing huge.
Yeah, I mean, one of the concerns, investment grade and even some non-investment grade of private credit is trading at the same spreads as traditional fixed income. Like, so you get no premium for illiquidity. That worries me. That kind of thing, I think. Fixed income markets are priced for perfection at the moment. So, you always have to pick your spots. We have a huge secondaries business. I think that they've deployed this current fund with about a 26% average discount. There's been 70% deployed. And what I say is, it's not that the valuations are wrong of the private equity. It's that there's not a lot of supply to create liquidity in that market because there's not a lot of secondaries. But that gives you a little bit of a pricing element.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.